Alrighty, so welcome to tonight's live stream, which we'll be heading into this morning. My name's Jim, this is Australis Fishing. All views in my live streams are my own. So what we're going to do tonight is I'm in Western Australia, and to be exact in the southwest of Western Australia. And what I want to do is just basically show you how to tie a few different flies that you can use to fish in the southwest. And from experience of over 40 years, it'll just fast track you so you'll be able to go out there, fish, and actually have a good chance of catching fish on fly. Alright, so first things first, one of the most important things that you fly tie with is your hooks. So what we're doing here is I use Kamasan hooks. They're a Japanese made hook, very thin, very strong, and very good at setting the hook into your fish. Okay, now the model that we're using is the B-940 size 6. As well as that, I've got some WSB Tackle O'Shaughnessy's, just the traditional hooks there, alrighty, for larger flies. And then as we go along, we also have crab hooks. These are a short shank hook that are very strong. And on top of that, what they do, they allow you to use it to tie smaller crustacean flies and smaller minnow patterns and saltwater fish patterns that help you with your fishing. Now, on top of that, the materials that we're going to use today. So, with your materials, hello 2 Pints, how are you? With your materials, there's two types of materials that you can use. You can either use synthetic, which is man-made, or natural, which means they come from an animal, okay? So in this case, that's a bucktail. The colour that I've got here, this is called root beer. Now, root beer is a colour that works very well in the southwest of Western Australia because it's in between a ginger and a brown. So if I show you this colour here, that's a brown rug that I bought, or part of a rug that I bought from Spotlight down here. So the good thing about this is no animals have to die, right, to make the fly tying materials. And with your fly tying materials, alrighty, you have different ways of tying. So on top of that, you're going to need eyes. Now these are lead eyes that have been pre-painted, which makes your life so much easier. And these are designed to get your fly down to the bottom really quickly, which is where you catch most of your fish. I also have some bead chain here that I got from my local tackle store, which is Bunnings. All right, when you buy bead chain from Bunnings, it saves you a lot of money. On top of that, I have some Loon UV clear fly finish, water-based head cement from Loon, which is a bit of a godsend because what you can do then is actually tie flies and you don't get gassed out by the odour from you know, xylene and other stuff when you have your solvent based head cement. And then of course with our lateral lines, what I've got here is I've got a variety of different crystal flash. Okay, I've got pearl, I've got pink, I've got all sorts of stuff. Okay, the one that we're going to be using today that's a bronze type crystal flash. So what that does is that works in with these colors really well. Okay, so first flies that we're going to use and tie, first I'll rephrase that. The first flies that we're going to tie, if you're going to fish saltwater fly fishing or estuary fly fishing in the southwest of Western Australia, you can have 4 flies in your tackle box that should help you catch most fish that swim. Okay, so with that sort of thing, Clouser minnows tied by Bob Clouser, and he's a pioneer of designing a fly that rode with the hook up. On top of that, you've got Lefty's Deceivers, which were invented by Lefty Kreh, okay, very famous American fishing angler. And then on top of that, you've got your little Crazy Charlies, which work really well. You'll catch a variety of different fish on those. Okay, and then from there, I also tie a little prawn fly like this. which is probably a bit small for you to see now, but I'll show you in a second. These are tied with bead chain on the bottom side of the hook, so they right hook up. So they're not really described as a specific style of fly, but they still work. And on top of that, I like to use white 210 denier flat wax nylon, okay, from Danville's. When you soak this with head cement, it goes clear, and that's how they tie their surf candies and that sort of stuff. Surf candies would be the 4th fly. This would be the 5th fly, okay, because these are specific to the area. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to zoom in on the fly tying vise, and then what we'll do is we'll just start tying. And if you've got any questions during the fly tying, just ask, okay? Don't be afraid to ask, because that's what we're here for. We're here to interact with the community, okay? And help everyone's knowledge base. And lo and behold, excellent. I've actually got a white shirt behind it now, so I can contrast. Okay, so what's your favourite Crazy Charlie, lols? Or do you just like the name? Right. Excellent. All right. Now, one rule that we have with your fly tying is, yeah, high dope fishy, it goes up to 12 times, mate. I'll show you. It can go in again, watch. So this is only on 10.5 at the moment. This is on the full 12. Okay, so it just makes it easy to work with. Sometimes it zooms out, but that should be good like that. EJB Modding, how are you, stranger? What are you doing, mate? All right, so without further ado, let's tie some flies, because that's what we're here for. Let me just grab a, oops. That's a 4, and that's a 2. I have got boxes of these elsewhere, I just can't remember where I've put them. Rightio. Excellent, that's still focused on the Varsit. Right, and away we go. How are you, JP? Good to see you, mate. Alrighty, so these are the Camasan hooks B-940, size 4 and size 2, okay? We're going to go down as low as size 6. So what I'll do now is, these are a good size hook, the 4s, for your larger fish. Well, it's all about improving the viewer experience, dope fishing, in my book, so that's why I went out and invested in it, you know. Right. Okay. So what we have here now is we have a hook set in this Griffin vise, okay. Now, what I want to do, a massive hernia and PTSD. Mate, I'm sorry to hear that, bud. Umbilical or the other one? All right, so with this, what I want to do is I want to tie a Klaus Minnow / Crazy Charlie variation, okay? Now, when you do these, you don't really have to bind the whole hook shank, but I'm going to anyway, just through second nature. All right, so, whoops. Now when you tie Klaus minnows, you don't have to bind the hook shank like this, but I still do anyway. Right, and what we're going to do is, why is that like that? Hang on a second, fam. Just excuse me for a second. Let's try that. Okay, so Gripper, how are you? So this is your Loon water-based head cement. Now normally when you tie with water-based head cement, as soon as it dries you can take it out and use it, okay? When you use solvent-based head cement, it's a bit of a headache because you've got to wait at least 45 hours for the odour from the head cement to disappear, because it still stays as a residual on your fly. So you'll find, especially in freshwater, with trout having such an acute sense of smell, right, you won't have anything go near your flies. Now, what I'm going to do here now, okay, is in here I'm just going to do a couple of little beds of thread, because I've got to fit some eyes in here, okay? And the other thing with this too is I've got to give myself enough room back from the eye of the hook so that I can tie in a nicely shaped head on this as well, okay? Now one thing you've got to remember is you can tie your eyes on your hooks in different positions to get your fly to do different things. So you can tie your eyes right up close and have a very small head of the fly there, and then as you move your eyes further down the hook shank towards the bend, right, it will make your fly move differently in the water. Now the other thing you've got to remember too, okay, is that you can actually bend your hook so that when you tie the fly, it's nearly got like a 30-degree angle on it. When you retrieve that, when you're fishing, it actually looks like a fish grubbing in the water, but more about that later, okay? Now, what I'm going to do is, these are pre-painted lead eyes, right? Pre-painted lead eyes save you a lot of headaches, okay? So with this, what it'll do is it will allow you to tie the fly and then tie off on the fly, if you know what I mean, okay? So what I've done there is, you've got to remember as well, how you tie the taper on the head initially is how the shape of the head is going to end up, okay? So with that, what I have now, righty, is I have a beautiful taper just starting, got a couple of layers of thread there, and what that's going to do is it's going to allow me the freedom to just work through on this fly. Now, remember when I said to you that the white Danville's flat wax nylon disappears when you soak it in head cement? That's what happens here at the back. Now the traditional Bob Clouser minnow, he tied the underwing to it and put the underwing over the eyes and coming out the back. We don't do that, okay? I prefer a more modern type design where I actually put everything on top of the hook. Our inlet waters here are black, like jet black from the tannin stain from all the eucalypts, so anything that's underneath the fly here, right, would just disappear in the muck anyway, so that's why I like to put it on top. Okay, so the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to show you this little fly, okay, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to use some of this artificial material here. Now, one thing you don't want to do is you don't want to put too much material on you. Yeah. Anyway, right, so what I've got now is I've got all this fibre, okay, and what I've got to do here is I've got to get all these small coarse fibres out of here. So if you want to get left with all fibres one length, what you do is you pinch it where you want the fibres to finish, okay, and then what you do is you just strip all the smaller fibres that attach it to its, well, fake hide, right, like that. And then what we have there is we have the underwing for our fly. Okay, now look, when you tie these flies, you've got to remember artificial materials like this are far easier to tie flies with than the natural materials, because as you develop your experience with fly tying, a lot of your natural materials have hollow fibres, right? And your artificial ones don't. So we just put that in there. So what we have now is we have a nice little sparse underwing there. Okay, so what that's going to do is that's going to work out quite well for us, because ideally the tail from the end of the bend in the hook, you want it about the same length as the shank, and that's about spot on just by eye. So after a while you tend to develop your bearings and that sort of thing. Okay, now what we want to do is we want to keep this a similar colour. For some reason brim like brown and sort of bronze colours like this, that's more of a bronze than a brown there. What we might do is we'll give that a good dose of we'll give that one a good dose of crystal flash, and then what we'll do is we'll just put that in there like that, right, like so. And once again, this is an artificial material, so we don't have to worry about tension and all that sort of stuff. Okay, right, you can cheat here like they do sometimes, and what that'll do is that will basically keep these in a straighter line than if you don't use them. Now, the other good thing about water-based head cement, the easiest way to clean the fibres around the eye of your hook is just to use a lighter. Okay, look at that, beautiful. So what's happened is now the eye of the hook's clear. We've just burnt that back like that, and what we'll do is we'll just get some of the head cement down like this, and we'll get that absorbed by the materials around the head like so. Okay, and away we go. This fly works well in freshwater as well, fam. There's a lot of overlap between freshwater and estuary flies. Okay, now if you have a look at your root beer bucktail, see how we have different lengths of bucktail as we go along the tail. What you want to do is you want to try and use the shorter ones that join the bucktail to the original animal. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to break that off there. This I'm going to put aside on larger flies. Okay, and Lols, got a question for you, bud. Have you ever fly fished for pink snapper? Okay, well, if you haven't fly fished for pink snapper, you're not really in a place to comment, are you, bud? Because I've tied flies for people that have fished shark bait, okay? And what they've done is they've caught snapper in 40 feet of water on these sorts of flies, in a slight variation being a bit bigger, bud. All right, so snapper, when they're on the bite, mate, will hit anything. Okay, I've even seen them hit plastic, believe it or not. So what I've done now is, see how I've cleaned all the fibres out from the base of this? Okay, now what we have is we have a uniform width of bucktail there. Okay, and what I'm going to do is, how I cut the head here, right? Me, yeah, I fish Scotland dope fishy, but didn't catch anything. I got bitten off by a pike. I didn't need needed to use wire trace for them, you know. All right, so what I want to do now is, I just don't want to put too much tension on that, right? And I want to keep this almost conical in appearance. Okay. Now see how that's splayed? Right, I've shown you the difference there. So what I'll do is I'll just take that out for you now. What you've got to do, okay, is when you tie with natural materials, because the fibres are hollow, especially closest to the animal, as is the case with this one, right, what they'll do is they'll flare, okay? So let's just take this out now. And what you do is you just use lots and lots of strands, okay? Because when you do the artificial stuff, you just clamp it on, tie it down, and away you go. Okay? So here, right, we'll go back. We'll cut it again. Okay, like so. Beautiful, nice, crisp cut there. So it gets it all the length. Okay, and then what we'll do is we'll just bring this in here. And what you do is you just do gentle turns, right, trying to cover most of the head on the hook like that, and see how now what we've got when you do the gentle turns is see how that's got a straight wing on it. Now what I've done is I've deliberately tied this, okay, with the flat wax nylon at an angle like that. Okay, when I start building the head up and I start building over the flat wax nylon here like this, and it starts to become straightened on the hook, then what you'll find is it will compact the fly down more, okay? And what we'll be able to do is, there we go, then what we'll be able to do is get it to hold its position a bit better. Now see that there, how I'm not doing tight turns? Right, come on bud. Bring that in here. Right. Whoops, come back. There we go. Yeah, the hardest thing is trying to keep most of the thread away from the eye. Now, got a couple of little rogue bits in there. They might have twisted in when we did the head. So ta-da! What we've got now is we've got a little quite nice little bronze. Oh, yeah, I don't know what's wrong with these jaws. Okay, we've got a quite nice little bronze themed fly. Now remember, don't ever fall into the trap of trying to look at your flies from a human's perspective. What you've got to do is you've got to look at them from a fish perspective, right? So what we're going to do is just a little half hitch in here, like so. Lovely. Right, give another one in there. Lovely. Try not to bend that out too much. Okay, and then what we have is a lovely little fly. And what we're going to do is we're just going to seal this with head cement. Okay, whoops. Once again, I'm going to just clean the eye out. Great. Okay, a little bit of water-based head cement. Now, I'm just going to put that on top and let that be absorbed. Okay, like that. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to get some red nail varnish and paint the head red. Okay, and just from experience, when I've tied estuary flies, whenever I put a red head on them, I just seem to get a better strike rate. I don't know whether the fish need glasses on what they're doing. Okay, so there we go, beautiful. Now, what I'll do too is if you keep an eye on this, right, by painting that head a different colour, it's going to give a totally different sort of look to the fly, and I'll show you what I mean. So, I wonder, I don't know whether UV light would dry the head cement quicker, I don't know. I don't think so though, would it? Does it heat it up or anything like that? No, not really. Okay, so this is a little bottle of $2 nail varnish from the local chemist, okay? And what we're going to do now is, this is the final touch to this fly, all right? just going to sit there. So let's just bring this in here now. I'm just going to get a little bit of nail polish on the front of this fly. Okay. And see how the total appearance of this fly has changed. And we've just done one little adjustment, which is the red head. Okay. There we go. Beautiful. All right. Now, that is a really nicely proportioned fly. Okay. Now, I don't tie art, people. I tie flies that catch fish. My hat goes off to the people that tie art. I'm not one of them. All right. So, as you can see there from this fly, right, we've got all the attributes of a good fly. So, when this is in the water and it gets wet, okay, this will all compact down, exposing the hook point. Okay, let me just get rid of a couple of these. Lovely. Right. Exposing the hook point. Okay. And then what you have a prominent eye, the red head, and as you can see here, the eye's clear totally. Right, so the eye's clear there. There's nothing blocking the eye at all. All right. And then what we've got is we've got a lovely tapered fly that is a near enough, is good enough resemblance to a fish. And look, there's an age-old argument whether fish see colour and that sort of stuff. Personally, that's not up to me to decide, and I'm not fazed by it either way. All I know is that when I tie these flies, they work. Now, there are other variations we can do of this, and the good thing about this is too, is when this sits on the bottom, whether it's rock or sand or whatever, it'll sit at an angle slightly like that, because of, or I should say, slightly like that because of the eyes, right? So the eyes will slightly headed up. So when you fish a loop on the front and you retrieve it, the head will bop down much like a natural, and then the tail will follow, okay? So what I'm going to do now is, I'm just going to give it one more coating of nail varnish, okay? Like so. And what we're going to do here is, like that. Beautiful. We haven't got that on any of the eyes, right? It's painted up really nice, and that's a fly that people would be happy, right, to have in their fly box to fish the rivers down south. I'd fish that in any river down south, okay? So what we'll do now is I'll show you another little variation, okay? Another little variation of this is, hey Hawk, how are you, bud? Mate, every fly that you fish is a wet fly, pal. So whether you like, or they all end up in the water, unless they're dry flies or emergers and they're either on or in the top water film. But yeah, here in Australia, especially Western Australia, mate, we always fish right on the bottom. That's where 99% of our fish are caught. Okay, so that's the coolest part, especially in the rivers, because things heat up so quickly here, you know. All right, so what we'll do now is we'll put in another fly. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to do a variation on the underwing. I'm going to use fox fur. Fox fur is a really dense fur. In some instances, I think fox fur isn't waterproof, but it's not far off, if that makes sense, okay? So I'm just going to do that right through here. I'm going to come back now about here and just leave a larger head on it this time. Right, bring that through here. There we go. And what we've got is we've got the little bed of thread for our eye. Right, and we're ready to tie these in. Now I'll show you a little trick. Right, and this is a little trick that a lot of people use when they tie saltwater flies. Have I got my super glue? Yes. All right, so same old story. If you want quality, you buy American Loctite Power Gel, or yeah, Power Gel. Very, very good product to use tying flies, and on top of that, you've got in your own little dispenser, and not being the liquid super glue, it doesn't belt around everywhere flat out. So what we'll do is we'll just get another little lead eye that's been painted here. I've got about 1,000 of these somewhere. I need to find them. Okay, and what we'll do is this. Ta-da! So we'll just there we go. All you need literally just a little dollop there. See how we've got the gel on there now? Right. So what we do with that is try not to stick your fingers on there like I've done before when I started out doing this. Right, there we are. That's smack bang in the middle of those two little mounds of thread that we tied. Whoops, don't do that. Right. Ay. Okay, and then what you do is after winding that, oh really, yeah, we're going to have storms tomorrow here, 2 points. So what we've got here now is I've got that tied in, okay, and what we've got is a really solid foundation for our fly. Right, we've got a bed of thread. The eyes are locked in. They've got that extra strength there with the super glue. Once again, I'm just going to get some of this wonderful Loon water-based head cement. Okay, and away we go. All right, so what we'll do is we'll just leave that to set for a second. I'm just going to get some of this fox fur from good old Cedric. I've had Cedric for a long time. Best $10 I overspent. Okay, so ta-da! What we have now, okay, is this is fox fur. See the difference and how much more dense it is than other fibres? So what we're going to do is just take this out. And look, people, I've got a rotary vise. When it comes to fly tying, rotary vices are a cheat code. They're great. All right, so what we're going to do now is we're going to make this one a lot thicker, right? I want this one to be a bit chunkier, okay? And what it'll do is it'll give it a slightly different contrast. So you've got to remember, with most fish that you see, sharks, bait fish, whatever, the top of the fly is darker than the bottom of the fly. So see this? What we have now, we have a really good chance of a silhouette here where the root beer bucktail, which is the top wing, will be slightly darker than the bottom foxhair wing, but that's enough of a contrast, you know. So what I'll do is this. I'm just going to cut this off. Now the other thing is too, see all this fur here? That makes excellent dubbing. So if you've got a food blender that you don't use for food, mix your dubbing in it, people. Okay, so there's the thunder already. Should do, but with fox fur, when it gets wet, 2 pints, it actually swells a bit, which just gives it a fair bit of body, and what it'll do is it'll make the fly ride hook up as well. So, lovely. Yeah, fox fur is a very underrated fly tying material, people. bit like peacock herl. Now let's just put that in there. What you want to do is you want to try and keep your materials on top of the hook, like so. Right, let's bring that through here. There we are, beautiful. Okay, so what we've got is we've got a beautiful little fox fur underwing, and to be straight up with you, I could probably tie this as it is now, tie it off and catch fish with it, no dramas, okay? Now remember what I said about the white thread disappearing when it gets wet with head cement? Check this out. More so with the solvent-based head cement because it's clear. Okay. Now, what we're going to do here is, hey Enormous Chopper, how are you, bud? Welcome to the stream, mate. We're just continuing. I haven't been speaking English for very long. We're just continuing our theme with the flies for rivers and inlets in the southwest of the state that I live in, bud. Now, okay, lovely. So what I'm going to do is, this is going to be my lateral line, and it's just going to give it a little bit of sparkle when I tie it. Okay, like that. And the good thing is, people, don't be afraid to experiment with variations of materials on flies until you figure out what works in your area, if you know what I mean. There's no right or wrong with fly tying. If you're catching fish, right, it's right. I mean, you know, in some instances, there's some absolutely stunning flies out there that look so lifelike they're ridiculous, and they don't really seem to do the job in catching fish. I mean, they're works of art, but, you know, as some people say, works of art are usually hung up on a wall to be admired by people. There we go. So, we've got the underwing. Lots of mistakes. Never be afraid to fail. Mate, I've had some absolute disasters on live stream. Enormous Chopper. Just put it down to experience and don't do the same mistake again. Okay? Yeah, don't ever be afraid to fail, mate. Don't be measured by how good you are when you're at the top. Measure how good you are by how well you're able to recover, mate, when you hit the bottom, you know. All right, so there we go. Beautiful. So we're just continuing with our little bronze themes, right? Now, what I've got here is I've got this root beer bucktail, right? I'm just going to get, yeah, these are really thick. The only problem is I want to use some of this bucktail on saltwater flies later, and the fibres further up the tail are, that's exactly right, Hawk. That's exactly right, bud. The fibres further up the tail are longer and they suit bigger saltwater flies. So what we've got here now is, see how we have this taper here from the bucktail. If I pinch that about there, what it'll do is I'll be able to remove all the fibres that are shorter than that length there, okay? So, give that a bit of a flick. And what we've got now, okay, you've got to be careful because they can get in everywhere. There we are. Great. So, ta-da. Okay, now that we've got that, we've got to cut this so that the head fits. So basically, I've got to cut this at a taper, right, of an angle of about 30 to 45 degrees, like that. And the length of the cut has to equal the distance between the eye and the lead eyes and the eye of the hook there, okay? So what you do is you line up your tail, bring this in here. Don't be afraid to put your scissors just behind the eye, get the angle right. Voila, there we go. Okay, now that's still tapered. Beautiful. And then what we do is we just plonk that in there. Now see how I've taken a longer thread to this? And what I'm doing is I'm just winding it back like so. Oh, don't do that. Yeah, that's a really good saying, Chopper. I might use that. I remember I did a guided fly fishing tour a while ago, and this person was really into his philosophy and that sort of stuff. And he's gone to me, oh, what's your favourite weight combo to use? And I said, look, you know, without trying to sound insensitive, I said, I don't really care what weight it is as long as it's balanced. And he looked at me with this strange look on his face. He says, yeah, I've been reading a book about a Japanese samurai. Was it Yamamoto or someone? I don't know. And he said he didn't care what weapon he had in his hand, right, as long as it was balanced. And I went, oh, that's a bit profound. So there is method to madness, people, you know, and it's the same old story. You've just got to have your gear balanced, right? And what that'll do is that'll allow you to, you know, use it effectively. The Tower of Poo, is that like the Tower of Poo? Because that has a different meaning, Hawk. Right, there we are. All right, just going to hold that like that. So, a couple of half hitches there. The other thing is too, okay, is, oh, Zenbook, okay. I can wind a couple of turns of thread around here so the actual tail compacts in. But what you're denying yourself there is you're denying a lot of movement from the bucktail and other material, which gives it a bit of life in the water, okay? Right, so once again, here we go. Like that, that's a lovely tie there. Let's have a look. A couple of average ones. Nearly at beginner status. Okay, there we go, lovely. Yeah, the bottom end of this fly has really quite thick, the bottom end of the bucktail has quite thick fibres on it, right? And with those fibres, it does present a little bit of a difficulty in trying to stop them from splaying when you tie the fly, but you get over it and work through it. All right, so once again, okay, we've got our head cement drying on the fly, like so. Right, I'll give that a minute. A little bit of insurance there. Just clear the eye out quickly with the lighter. That's how barbers clean out ear hair, so I guess it works. And now what we have is a lovely fly, okay? Now the other thing is too, right, you've got to remember, this is a slightly different fly to the first one we tied. So have a look at the difference in the contrast there, okay? So I used the artificial material and I used the root beer bucktail on top, and see how there's not really much contrast compared to this fly. So with this fly we have a darker top wing. Wax and Thrax, how are you, bud? Welcome to the stream, mate. 7 years, you're one of the original ones, bud, I think. Yeah, I think you followed later in the year because I started in the May. Okay, and there we go. So you got two beautiful flies there that people would be happy with in their fly boxes. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to get a little bit of nail varnish. The old don't argue, there we go. Okay, lovely. There we go, lovely. And what that's going to do is that's going to imitate the gills from a fleeing baitfish. How have you been, Wax and Thrax? Are you well, my friend? Is life treating you well, bud? Okay, ta-da. Maybe if we bring that back a bit, we'll get a bit more light. So what we have there is a beautiful little fly. Pretty good, mate. I just had a few heart issues. My heart went tachycardic, so I had to get that sorted. And now I've got to just work through, get the weight down and everything. Because I was sick for nearly 5 months, I've lost a lot of fitness in that. I'm starting to get a little bit better, but my core fitness is down to practically nothing, mate. Okay. There we are. Lovely. Always do 2 coats. Oh, that's life, mate. I'm 55 now, Wax and Thrax. Stuff's going to start dropping off everywhere, mate. Okay. So there we go. Beautiful. So what we have here now is we have the red head. See how it just gives it a nice little contrast? Now, like I said to you, I don't know whether people get wrapped up in colours of flies and lures and that. I don't. But I know one thing. When I started fishing with a loop on the end of my line attached to flies, my catch rate went up about 40%. And then when I started to fish red-headed flies in the estuaries and inlets, my catch rate went up about another 10%. So little things like that and little snippets over time help you with your end result. Now, wherever you are in the world, red might not be the colour for you. It might be grey. It might be blue. It could be purple. It could be beige, pink, whatever. But what you need to do is you need to spend time on the water and figure that out for yourself, because it only works to your advantage in the long run anyway, you know. So as you can see, these little Klauser minnows are coming along pretty well. So we'll just put them down there. Okay, and me personally, like I said to you, I like using the fox fur as underwings on these estuary flies, because what it does just gives it a little bit more body. And then look, with these flies too, when you retrieve them, 2 pints, let me put this to you, mate. Okay, so people, 2 pints is actually okay. Oops. Oh, hang on. Gotta love technology, famo. AI tracking, it's brilliant. That's about the only AI I use. Now, 2 pints. That's not a stupid question, okay? But this is the difference between saltwater fishing and fly fishing in freshwater, okay? In saltwater fly fishing, your fly's always moving, okay? Now, in freshwater, you can fish a dry fly, you can fish it under a strike indicator, you can have a dry fly as your strike indicator, and then you can have a fly underneath it like a nymph, so when the nymph gets taken, your dry fly drops. So with your question, you fish a lot of freshwater fishing, hence you ask that question, okay, which is perfectly understandable. Saltwater fishing doesn't have as much finesse, mate. Basically, you just cast it out as far as you can, working with the current or against it, which is the same as freshwater fishing, okay, and you just retrieve it along the bottom. But there are 2 rules that you need to follow with saltwater fishing, or 3 really, okay. First thing is you find structure. So when you find structure, you have shade under the structure, And structure can be rocks, can be, you know, snags, can be overhanging trees, whatever, right? You find your structure. Secondly, don't fish your fly too quick. And thirdly, you've got to have your fly in the first foot on the bottom of the area that you're working, okay? Follow those principles and you'll be surprised how your catch rate will go up. Because the thing is, a lot of people are worried about snagging their flies and that sort of stuff. If you're worried about that, you need to take up another sport, because unless you're getting snagged, whether that's spinner, lure, soft plastic, swim baits, hard bodies, whatever, okay, you're not fishing deep enough, and you need to do that. Because of a lot of instances too, until you put a fly right in front of a fish's nose, it's not really going to attack it. I'm going to take us down south to a little creek where there's 6 pound trout in this much water. And what you do is you go upstream, you let your lure out, right, and it'll hug the outside of a bank, and you've got to guess the exact length of the lure, and when you grab your spool, it'll tighten and it swings in the current, right? If you can get the lure or even the fly, right, within that far of the fish's snout, it doesn't really matter what you put in front of it, the fish will hit it. I don't know whether it's a territorial strike, I don't know whether it's instinctive strike. Don't worry about that. That's the human perspective. You've got to make it as easy as possible for the fish to find your fly so they can take it. Don't get wrapped up in different theories and scientific theories. And, you know, I mean, some of these fishing podcasts, like, there's one on YouTube that I watched for about 3.5 minutes, and I felt like kicking the screen in on the computer, because there's a thing happening worldwide now where people are spending big money on fly fishing tackle, booking their holidays in, you know, the Bahamas and Florida and the Everglades and that, and suddenly becoming fly fishing anglers. Not very good at their casting, and they seem to think that because they've got the expensive gear, that helps them out, okay? We're going to put paid to that sort of mentality through our YouTube content, because I'm going to go through the science of casting, right? And it's quite simple, and yeah, a lot of people aren't going to be happy, but hey, that's life, isn't it? So what we're going to do now, right, is let's do a smaller variation. Now that was on a size 4 hook, okay, which is here. Oh, it is 2 pints. And it's very, you know, I find it very un-Australian and unproductive when you've got people standing side by side on a riverbank, on a saltwater river, estuary river, whatever, and one turns their nose up at someone because they're not using gear from a certain company that's worth a certain amount of money, okay? So I bought my edge fly rods. I'm 55 years of age. I've used something like gripper. I lost count of how many different fly rods I've used and bought, okay, and none of them have lived up to their sort of hype. And as soon as I got the edge fly rods, I just knew that it was right, okay? So that's where I'm at with that. So let me just show you the difference too in hook sizes. So the first 2 flies we tied, right, is size 4 flies, okay? So these are the size 4 hooks that are in the vise now. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you the size 6 flies next to it. Totally different beast, right? Your fly has different proportions, all right? Your fly has different proportions, okay? Oh, no, don't be like that. It's following my finger. I don't want it to follow my finger. Right. your fly has. I don't really have a favourite 2 pints, but I do have what I use. So with the edge fly rods, yeah, I know, mate, the predicted text is like that. With the edge fly rods, they were about $900 and something each. Okay, I've got a really good friend of mine to help me buy some out of America, as well as the ones that I got here in Australia. That's about the limit on a fly rod for me, especially when it's made in the USA, you know. Like I said, you want quality, you buy American. It's quite a simple equation, fam. Right? Now, the Redington fly reels in the Behemoth, I think they're a fantastic value for money fly reel under $200. All right, so I have the 5, 6, 7, 8 and 9, 10 in the Behemoth fly reels with spare spools. I have a weight forward on one, and I have a shooting head on the other. Now, see the difference in the hooks? Okay, oh, how do I get out of this? All right, see the difference in the hooks there? Right, so one's a size 2, one's a size 4, but they are significant. Now, the most important thing here is, right, don't worry about the length of the hook. Okay, obviously to a certain extent you do. In this case, the most important governing factor is the distance between the barb and the shank. Okay, that determines a lot of things. For example, if you're bait fishing, right, what you need to do is you buy hooks that match the width of your bait there. A lot of people get wrapped up in appearance and that sort of stuff. So check that out. See how much smaller that is? Right, can you see that in there? Okay, whoops. Let me just get that right in there. Right, that's level with the eye. Now see how much smaller that is? I can't dress this the same as the size 4 hook that I used, because what I'll do is I'll just block the fly up with too much material, and what'll happen is it'll make it difficult for the hook to set. So what I'm going to do now is this, okay? This is the size 6 Camisam B-940 hook. This thread here is probably a little bit thick for this hook, but the size 6 fly is the limit for this thickness thread as well, okay? So once again, what we'll do is we'll start off like so, da-da-da-da-da-da-da, like that, right, whoops. And bring that back, okay. And look, if you've got any questions that you want answered, right, just ask them. We don't treat questions as being silly on here, okay? If you need to ask a question, I'll try and supply you the answer if I know the answer, okay? But if not, I'll help you try and figure out how to find it, okay? So, what I'm going to do now too is, the lead eyes that I used on the size 4 hooks, okay, would be a little bit big and a little bit cumbersome for this fly that I'm about to tie now on the size 6. So you've got to be relative with your sort of materials as well, right? So what we're going to do is, I'm just going to a little bit of head cement, and while the head cement's in there, right, what I'm going to do is I'm going to get the bead chain eyes out from yesterday. Here they are. Right. Okay. Right. Now, these are roughly the same size as the lead eyes that I tied on the size 4 hooks, but they're nowhere nearly as heavy, okay? The other thing is too, people, you can do variations of these. This is plastic bead chain, I can tie flies with plastic bead chain, and what that will allow me to do is it will allow me to have these flies float. So what I can do, or try and float, and what I can do, right, is I can actually tie them so I can fish 2 or 3 flies at the same time on rigs, if you know what I mean. Okay, so what we'll do here now, and I'll show you the difference in the bead chain. So this is about 2.5mm bead chain, which is probably a little bit small for this fly, and that's the, whoops, that's a magnetic pen, and that's the slightly thicker stuff. See the difference in size? Okay. Enormous chopper. I have sold flies before, and I've sent flies all over the world, my friend. So if anybody wanted to buy some flies, I'm open to it. And what I would do though is I would research what sort of flies they want. Yeah, I know, Chopper. I just try and protect people's identity, mate, because you don't know who's watching the streams, you know what I mean? A lot of lonely people out there in the world, Will, that, no, you're right, mate. So there we go, a little dollop of the Loctite power gel, right? Okay, now this is more of a crazy Charlie style eye, right? But for what we're doing with these flies, right, this is all we really need. What you always want to do, okay, what you want to do is you always want to try and tie your flies, right, so that they're perpendicular. So see how I turn that side on with the camera, right, and you can only see one eye? That means they've been tied properly. The reason why it looks like there's 2, okay, is because the camera's angled this way, this way, and the fly's this way, okay? So there we go. Now, when you've done your cross pattern like that with the eyes, what you need to do is you need to bunch up the thread so the eyes don't move. So what you do here, okay, is you just tie back towards the eyes. See how we've got that little triangle of thread behind there, okay? If you want to be sneaky, you just half hitch that off like that, right? And then what you do is come down here. It's much easier for you to tie flies when you've got a bed of thread back from the eye, and then what I'm going to do is I'm just going to bind this back right like that, okay, and ta-da, what we've got now is we've got the fly eyes locked in. So if you have a look underneath, see how we've got like the crisscross, and then that's not moving. Vaguely, my friend. I don't watch too much television, Will, so I'm hopeless when it comes to movie quotes and that sort of stuff. Even when I play Trivial Pursuit with the family, geography, and sport, no problems whatsoever. Oh, was it? Okay. PlayStation 1, the height of technology at that time. Okay, so now what we do here is like this. All right, okay, beautiful. What I'm going to do is, I like to tie my clouser flies at a slight angle. Okay, so what we'll do is there, like so, just a slight angle, because when you rest your hand on the vise and you've got it down like that, it's just a bit easier to tie, okay? So, now what's happening is, we have to come up with new dimensions on the fly. The length of the shank between the eye and the bend there in line with the barb is a lot shorter than the size 4. So I can't dress this fly as thick as the other one, because like I said, I'll block up the point of the hook and it could affect our strike rate. So what I'm going to do here is, and don't be afraid to put your material on the hook while you're learning, famo, like that, right? Just to figure out what you're doing, you know. I'll show you another little trick. With fox hair, what you can do is you can spin the end like that, right? And see how it keeps everything together. And then what you do is you just pick your point where it goes in, like so. Remember, the cut has to be the same length as the distance between the eye of the hook and the eyes here. So like I said, just plonk that on there, get it about right, hang on, there we are, okay, and whoomper, right, beautiful. Still got the twist in the tail, right, like all good stories, there's always a twist, right. Now, bring that down there like that, beautiful, right, bring that back like so, okay, and voila, what we've got is the tail tied in perfectly. See that? What do you mean by favourite tie? As in when I go out, 2 pints, or a blue, a red? Is that what you're referring to? He's going to look at the chat now and go, oh, you bugger. Right, there we go. We'll clean the eye out while we're here. Ah, that lovely smell of burning fur. I don't really have a favourite fly 2 pints because all flies have their place, right? So for example, in the winter, I wouldn't use this fly. I would use these flies with the bead heads. Okay, on them like that, okay? Now see how it's a much heavier fly? Right, let's do that. See how it's a much heavier fly and it's got like the little shrimp sort of profile? That's what I'd use in the winter. So when you have favourites, you tend to limit yourself, bud. It's always best to keep an open mind when you're fishing and don't limit yourself to favourite and best and all that sort of stuff, because that's a personal perspective. That's another human perspective. Remember, do this from a fish perspective, okay? Now, let me show you another little way to dress your materials. This bucktail here that we're going to tie on is the last thing we're going to tie on. So what I want to do is, I just want to, this is a brush from a hair clipper, right? Fantastic, because it's got lots of soft fibres. And what I can do like that, right, is tease that in. The only problem is a little bit of static electricity. Let's not try and start a fire. Right. Okay. Now, what I'll do is here, I want to give this a little bit more flash. Okay. A lot of your smaller fish tend to be a bit shinier. Okay. As they get bigger, they tend to sort of a little bit duller, if you know what I mean. In some instances, depending on what species of fish. So I'm going to give this a little bit more lateral line here. Right. I'm going to keep up with a nice tapered head. There. Rightio, I'm starting to get my eye back, people, on distance and proportion. Alright, so what we do now is, right, we tie that off. And what we've got is, that's like the lateral line, because when you look at fish from side on, not so much sharks, right? You've got the lighter underbelly on the fish. You've got the lateral line, which is what this bronze mylar is trying to convey. It's normally a shade of colour in between the top and the bottom of the fish, right? And then what we'll do is, obviously, we'll put our wing on top. Now, what I'm going to do is, because we've got the fox hair on the underwing, right, with that there, I'm going to show you another material. It's called FAUX hair, or faux hair, which is French for false hair, right? And what I'm going to do is, this is going to make our life a lot easier, right? And what will happen is, it'll save our use of the reef beer bucktail. But before that, this is the rug that I got from the Red Dot store. Okay, see that? Right, that's the brown rug that I've got. So there's nothing stopping us trying another little variation. If you get a situation where you've got fish on the bite, right, that are hitting anything, swap over to your flies made from artificial materials. They will last a lot longer than the ones that are made with partial natural materials. Okay, so what that'll do is, let's just bring this in here. Okay. Hey there, Barnsdale. How are you? Welcome to the stream, my friend. How are you, bud? What's going on? You well? Actually, no. Let's use the faux hair. We'll use the faux hair. Give me a second. Come on. Or faux bucktail, whatever you want to call it. Okay, so this makes your fly tying really quite simple. Okay, once again, artificial material, a lot tougher than the natural. So what we got here is, we have got a hank of perfect length fibres. So what you do is, right, just break off a little section like I've done, right? And then what you do is just use that section for smaller flies. So what you'll do is you'll be able to get 2 or 3 flies from one strand. Okay. Hang on. Bring that in there. You bugger. All right. So there we go, like that, see? What I'll do is I'll just break that off. Okay. Where's the other smaller one? Is there any other smaller one left? How's life treating you, Barnsdale? You well? Okay. And what we'll do is we'll just plonk this on top like that. Okay, now see how that's really quite uniform at the end? In nature, that doesn't really work. So let me just show you a little trick here. What we're going to do is, let's bring that back like that. See how tough it is to cut even with the scissors? Right, did you hear that sound like the grind, if you know what I mean? So what we'll do is we'll just bring a bit of that in to taper like so. Right, see how that looks a little bit more natural now because it's uneven? Right, plonk that in there like so. Now what we'll do is we'll measure our head. So I'm putting the scissors just behind the eye. Okay, I'm just going to cut that and try not to blunt my scissors at the same time. That was terrible. This is a very tough material, family. Very tough. You can tell that it's artificially made. All right, so bring that down here. There we are. Right, lovely. No, that's terrible. The other problem with this stuff too is it's got no grip like natural materials. Natural materials well, that's the best way to do it, Barnsdale, and you save yourself a bit of money, mate. Okay? Yeah, all it's going to cost you really is your time, Cobb. Rightio, so let's try this again. What we'll do is we're going to move the 210 denier thread back to the eye. Don't do that. Right, now remember, this is an artificial material, so you can go in quite, no it's not, it's sliding off like a bugger. What a pain. Hang on. Right. Actually, I'm not going to use that. I thought that would work on the fly quite well. I'm not happy with that, because the other thing is too, what will happen is while you're fishing, unless you're using a unless you're using a solvent-based head cement with a water head cement, that'll just fly out. So let's just leave that for a second, and what we'll do is we'll get some of this false hair here, right? And then that'll be easier. This will have more grip. That's just like a shiny plastic. Okay, so hey, right. Okay, so all right. So what I'm doing here is, okay, I'm going to dress this hair here, like that. Right, I need a bit more. So let's cut a bit more. You might have to do 2 or 3 clumps of this to get it going, you know. But you got to do what you got to do. Okay. And all I'm doing is pulling out the shorter feathers here. Not feathers. All I'm doing is just pulling out the fibres here. Okay, like so. Bringing that down like that. Let's see how that looks now. That's much better. See the difference in the contrast there? So what I'm going to do is, because this grips, I'm going to have no problems, and it's so much easier to cut. That other material is like wire fammo, but the only difference is wire grips, you know. Come on, back we come. Oh, great. All right, let's bring this down here. There we go. Now, like I said, people, don't worry about the human perspective on this. Worry about the fish perspective, okay? Wow, I'm getting down to within millimetres of my threads and heads and all that. Lovely, okay? So what we've got now is a lovely proportion little fly. Oops. That's going to clamp down in the water like that and become streamlined, and basically with the bronze crystal flash at the back, what that's going to do is that's going to wiggle like a tail, so the fish will be able to see it. Now let's just clean out the eye. Beautiful. Let's double check that. Very good. Okay. Now, wait, what? How are you, mate? Thanks for the compliment, bud. Like I said, mate, when I wrote for that book in America and I sent the explanation and that sort of stuff, and we had the Zoom call and everything, yeah, you got to remember, people, fly fishing's a little bit like golf. If you've got any pretentious sort of personality traits, it suits you perfectly, you know, right? So, yeah, that's how it goes. And when you don't have those traits, it makes life very easy for you, you know what I mean? Wait, what? How are you, bud? You well? Well, Barnsdale, if it also gives you a little bit of peace of mind, mate, do it. You know, that's basically, yeah, why you do it as well, you know. Oh, excellent, bud. Congratulations. Oh, yeah, I mean, there's a lot of pretentious sort of themes creeping into like fly fishing and fly tying now, Barnsdale. So, yeah, I don't really have time for it. There we go. Once again, we'll just get a beautiful little red head on that. Lovely, this works well. Excellent. Here we go. Awesome, beautiful. Yeah, that's right, mate. You know, I've done trade shows before where I had these English gentry wannabes come up, mate. You know, the old $2 millionaires that seem to think they know best about everything in life, right? And yeah, they don't like it when you tell them to move on. But some people, that's all they've got, Cobb. Okay, so what we have now is a beautiful little fly. Right, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to plonk these down like so. And we have just very subtle variations, okay? So what we'll do now is, right, I'm just going to sort of work out of my zoom here, right? Let's just see if we can get this. Lovely. Right in there. This is the advantage of AI zoom. Okay, Famo. So what we have now is we have 3 flies tied in the same fin. Yeah, that's how life goes, Barnsdale. And at the end of the day, the only actions you can really control are your own, and the only time you sort of have to interact with people is when they try and affect yours. So this is the first fly that we tied, okay? So same pattern. These two have got the lead eyes on them, right? That one has the brown underwing. Oh, hang on, I think I've done a naughty there. Right, tap that so it stops zooming. Right. So this one has got the underwing here, which is the top wing on this fly, which is the last one that we tied. This one here has the fox fur with the root beer bucktail, and this one here is the fox fur underneath with the artificial hair that I got from the little haberdashery store, which is here. Okay, and so basically, you know, it's slightly variations of the same fly. Now, if you've got a change in tide and you've got very little water movement, you would use this one here with the bead chain eyes. What it would have is a natural presentation, and it would undulate in the water when you fish this with a loop. Okay, very short, slow, deliberate strips. I'm going to show people how to do a figure of 8 retrieve. Figure of 8 retrieve catches a lot of fish, people. Not many people know what it is, but when you do it, you'll just think, right, I should have known this earlier. Right, if you've got a little bit of tidal movement and that sort of stuff, you always fish against the tide or upstream of where the water's flowing towards you, right? And then that way it'll sink. If you fish the side of you where the water's flowing away from you, if you're using a fly line, it'll grip and it'll lift your fly up in the water, okay? So fish these with loops, slow, deliberate retrieves, okay, and give the fish time to hit the fly. But I mean, these are, you know, these are $10 flies, $20 flies, sorry, these are $10 to $12 flies, people, okay? When you tie them yourself, obviously the cost is minimal, it's just your time that it costs, right? But they're 3 beautiful little flies, and like I said, bronze, hence the bronze crystal flash there, right? Bronze crystal flash, and this sort of, the root beer is in between ginger and brown, and then we've got a genuine brown wing there. But like I said to you, don't ever worry about the human perspective on things, right? worry about the fish perspective on things, okay? Because that's what you need to do.